Hi everyone and welcome. We've just been listening to the opening of my London Cantata that I composed for the choir a couple of years ago. In this video, the last before the summer break, I thought that I would give you an insight on how the work was put together and talk a little in technical detail about the method of composition and word setting. As you know, the opening of the first movement sets the words of William Dunbar's "In Honour of the City of London." However, this wasn't the first movement that I composed. The first was Shadwell's Stair. There is no doubt that the first movement is celebratory in style, and for me as a Londoner, Dunbar's poem expresses all that is good and grand. However, like other major cities, that can also be seen as a veneer that covers a different London that we can see later on. As the movement progresses, the scene begins to darken until we reach the lines of George Eliot's poem In a London Drawing Room. This is a wonderfully evocative poem, and her line, "The sky is cloudy, yellowed by the smoke," reminds me of my own childhood when I was sent to school in a smog mask because of the poisonous sulphuric atmosphere outside caused by the burning of coal. In fact, my father recalled a day when he was walking to work and he was so disorientated that he was searching for the white line in the road to get some bearing. When we come to the line "For all is shadow," I will bring up the score and you can see how the orchestra shimmers to provide a ghostly, foggy atmosphere. At the end of this movement, I use the poetry of one of my favourite poets, William Blake. The section starts with a self-quotation from my festival overture written for the Waltham Forest and Greater London Arts. The overture represents the bustle of urban life. Here's an extract from the opening of the overture, followed by the quotation in the London Cantata. The second movement is really a workers' song. I've set my own words in this movement, and I wanted to get an industrial feel. As you will see from the score, I achieved this using an ostinato figure in the strings, strong assertive rhythms, and a part for a metal object such as an anvil that illustrates the words, "The hammer blows as they graft in line." "As they spade the lime" is a reference to Limehouse, where in the past there were potteries, lime being a component in the manufacturing process. In movement 3, we hear from our poet a baritone soloist for the first time. The orchestration is sparse throughout this movement. Composed upon Westminster Bridge is possibly one of the most famous London poems written by William Wordsworth. Some believe that the poem is majestic in tone, but my interpretation is more muted and reflective. In the line, "Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still," I thought it was appropriate to use an almost unaccompanied choir in prayer-like fashion before the orchestra brings it to an end. The fourth movement is an interlude for small orchestra that I'm pleased to say got a very positive review from John France of Music Web International, who said, "This is a lovely little interlude that could gain traction as a miniature in its own right. The orchestration is charming." The theme of it is built on Westminster chimes that were originally composed for Great St Mary's in Cambridge. Other composers have used them, but I thought it was particularly pertinent in this case because of the London-Cambridge connection. I used the music a couple of years ago for my Christmas card. Now comes the darkest movement of the piece. John France observed the following. Anyone who has explored London Docklands will have been struck by the atmosphere of Shadwell. Despite 3 decades of gentrification along the Thames, there is still a feeling of slippery time. There has been considerable debate about the background and inspiration of Wilfred Owen's poem, Shadwell Stair. This is not the forum to discuss this, however, Pounds' music expresses the ghostliness of Owen as he explores this part of London, whether alive or dead. The poem is well sung by the baritone soloist. I first came across Shadwell Stair when at school, and it has left a lasting impression on me ever since. The other poet involved is again Blake. His reference to chartered streets is really an observation that even the streets are owned and controlled, and therefore the citizens are not free. My ghost in this movement should be seen as weary and shackled as he wanders forever along the Thames. I've really enjoyed preparing these videos for you, and I hope very much that you have gained some insight from them. They will all soon be made available on the Stapleford Choral Society website in a newly created members area. It may be a little time till we all meet up again, but it will come. My plan is to pick up with the Mozart coronation mass that was nearly prepared for performance. I'm sure that we'll soon find our feet again and be able to put this sorry episode behind us. The finale of the London Cantata uses the poetry of Amy Levy. This was a new discovery for me, and I love the descriptive nature of her poetry. I use the time signature 12/8, which means I can get the effect of a swirling wind on a March day. As you may remember, there is a reprise of the opening of the work at the end. I'm going to leave you with this section of the piece and some photographs taken by my friend Dan Bowden. He lives in London and he took these recently. He has given the sequence the title of Lockdown London. I hope you enjoy them. I'll be in touch with you again soon, so bye for now.